What happens when the most elite warriors in the world witness something that changes everything they believe about strength, courage, and honor? When 282 Navy SEALs gathered for what should have been a routine ceremony, none of them expected to see a moment that would haunt their dreams and reshape their understanding of true power. This is not just another military story. This is the account of Sarah Chen, a 26-year-old intelligence analyst who faced her darkest hour in front of America's most feared soldiers, and how her response to unthinkable humiliation became legend. They thought they were breaking her. They had no idea they were forging steel. In a world where respect is earned through blood, sweat, and unwavering determination, sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with weapons, but with the unbreakable spirit of someone who refuses to stay down. What you're about to read will challenge everything you think you know about what it means to be truly strong. The morning sun cast long shadows across Naval Base Coronado as Sarah Chen adjusted her uniform for the third time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. Today marked the culmination of 18 months of grueling intelligence work that had saved countless lives overseas. The ceremony honoring her contributions would take place in front of the largest gathering of Navy SEALs in recent history. Sarah had always been different. Born to Chinese immigrants who owned a small restaurant in San Francisco's Chinatown, she grew up understanding that respect wasn't given freely. Her parents worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, teaching her that excellence was the only currency that mattered in America. While other kids played video games, Sarah studied. While they complained about homework, she solved advanced mathematics problems for fun. At Berkeley, she majored in Middle Eastern studies and computer science, graduating summa cum laude at 22. The CIA recruited her before graduation, but Sarah chose military intelligence instead. She wanted to serve on the front lines of information warfare, not behind a desk in Langley. The Navy promised her exactly that opportunity. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison had been Sarah's direct supervisor for the past year. A decorated SEAL with 3 tours in Afghanistan, Morrison initially questioned having a civilian analyst embedded with his team. Sarah quickly proved her worth when she identified a terrorist cell's communication pattern that had eluded military intelligence for months. Her analysis led to the capture of a high-value target responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 countries. The base buzzed with unusual activity this morning. SEAL teams from across the country had converged for what the brass called a historic ceremony. Sarah's intelligence breakthrough had not only saved American lives but had also prevented a major terrorist attack on European soil. The Secretary of Defense himself would be presenting her with a commendation. Captain James Reynolds, the base commander, was a man of few words and fewer smiles. He'd been military for 32 years, rising through the ranks during some of America's most challenging conflicts. Reynolds respected Sarah's work but harbored old-school reservations about civilians receiving military honors. He'd voiced these concerns privately to Morrison, who defended Sarah passionately. As Sarah walked across the parade ground toward the ceremony platform, she noticed the SEALs forming perfect ranks. 282 of America's most elite warriors stood at attention. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Each man had endured Hell Week, survived countless dangerous missions, and earned the right to wear the Trident insignia. Many bore visible scars from combat, silent testaments to their service. Among them stood Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, a 20-year veteran with more confirmed kills than he cared to remember. Thompson had initially resented having an analyst receive recognition alongside combat veterans. In his mind, real heroes bled on foreign soil, not behind computer screens. However, he'd grudgingly admitted that Sarah's work had kept his team alive during their last deployment. The ceremony platform overlooked the Pacific Ocean, where SEAL teams regularly conducted training exercises. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that she'd spend countless hours analyzing intelligence reports about naval operations while the actual operators trained in waters visible from her office window. She'd always wondered what it felt like to be part of their brotherhood, to share their unspoken bond forged in combat. Sarah's parents sat in the VIP section, her mother dabbing tears with a handkerchief while her father maintained stoic composure. They'd closed their restaurant for the first time in 15 years to attend their daughter's ceremony. Her father had served briefly in the Taiwanese military before immigrating, and military honor held deep significance for him. Colonel Patricia Williams, the highest-ranking female officer on base, would be introducing Sarah. Williams had fought her own battles against discrimination throughout her career, breaking barriers in military intelligence. She saw something of herself in Sarah's determination and had become an unofficial mentor over the past year. The base photographer positioned himself strategically to capture the historic moment. This would be the first time a civilian intelligence analyst received such recognition in front of an assembled SEAL force. The image would appear in military publications and serve as inspiration for future analysts. As the ceremony began, Admiral Robert Mitchell took the podium. A former SEAL himself, Mitchell commanded respect throughout the special operations community. His presence elevated the ceremony's significance and demonstrated the military's commitment to recognizing all forms of service. Sarah's mind raced through the events that led to this moment. 18 months ago, she'd been a recent graduate with theoretical knowledge and ambitious dreams. Through countless 18-hour days, she'd learned to think like the enemy, to anticipate their moves, and to provide actionable intelligence that saved lives. Her computer screens had become windows into global terrorist networks, and her analysis had unraveled plots spanning multiple continents. The work hadn't been easy. Sarah endured criticism from colleagues who questioned her methods, superiors who doubted her conclusions, and the constant pressure of knowing that lives depended on her accuracy. She'd missed birthdays, holidays, and social gatherings, dedicating herself completely to her mission. Morrison watched from the officer section, feeling proud of his team member. He'd witnessed Sarah's growth from uncertain civilian to confident intelligence professional. Her questions during briefings had evolved from basic clarifications to sophisticated strategic insights that influenced mission planning. Morrison had recommended her for this recognition despite opposition from traditionalists. The wind picked up from the ocean, causing flags to snap crisply in the morning air. Sarah felt a moment of perfect clarity, understanding that this ceremony represented more than personal recognition. It symbolized the military's evolution, its willingness to honor excellence regardless of traditional boundaries. Behind the assembled SEALs, support staff and family members filled temporary bleachers. Military spouses who understood sacrifice, children who'd grown up with deployed fathers, and parents who'd sent their sons into harm's way all witnessed the celebration of a different kind of service. Security was unusually tight for the ceremony. Secret Service agents blended with military police, their presence necessitated by the Admiral's attendance and the concentration of special operations personnel. Sarah noticed their watchful eyes scanning the crowd, a reminder that even moments of celebration required vigilance. The base chaplain had opened the ceremony with a prayer honoring those who served in various capacities. His words emphasized that courage took many forms, from charging enemy positions to spending sleepless nights analyzing intelligence that kept others safe. Sarah felt the weight of those words, understanding her place in the broader military mission. As Admiral Mitchell began reading her citation, Sarah's thoughts turned to the terrorist she'd helped capture. Through months of patient analysis, she'd identified patterns in seemingly random communications, traced financial networks across multiple countries, and provided the precise intelligence needed for a successful operation. That terrorist would never again coordinate attacks that killed innocents. The ceremony represented a culmination, but Sarah knew it was also a beginning. The recognition would open new opportunities, greater responsibilities, and higher expectations. She'd proven herself capable of excellence under pressure, and the military would expect her to maintain that standard throughout her career. Unknown to everyone present, including Sarah herself, this moment of triumph balanced on the edge of disaster. Hidden tensions, personal grudges, and institutional prejudices were about to collide in a way that would transform celebration into crisis. The very recognition meant to honor Sarah's achievements would become the catalyst for events that tested her character in ways no intelligence analysis could prepare her for. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beyond the ceremony platform, its vast expanse a reminder of the world's complexity and the constant vigilance required to protect freedom. Sarah stood at attention, unaware that the most challenging test of her life was about to begin, and that 282 of America's most elite warriors would witness her greatest trial. Admiral Mitchell's voice carried clearly across the formation as he read Sarah's citation. The assembled SEALs listened with professional attention, though many still questioned whether a civilian deserved recognition alongside combat veterans. The morning sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows across the parade ground where America's most elite warriors stood in perfect formation. Sarah felt her heart racing as the Admiral detailed her intelligence breakthrough. 18 months of painstaking analysis had identified a terrorist communication network that intelligence agencies across 3 countries had failed to crack. Her work led to the prevention of coordinated attacks in London, Paris, and Berlin, potentially saving thousands of innocent lives. As the Admiral continued, a commotion erupted near the back of the formation. Master Chief Petty Officer Derek Hawkins, a 25-year veteran with multiple deployments, had been drinking heavily the night before. His marriage was failing, his oldest son had been killed in Afghanistan 6 months earlier, and his anger at the world had been building for weeks. The sight of a civilian receiving honors that he felt should be reserved for combat veterans triggered something dark within him. Hawkins broke formation and began pushing through the ranks toward the platform. His fellow SEALs initially thought he was responding to some security threat, but his erratic movements and aggressive posture quickly revealed something was wrong. Lieutenant Commander Morrison spotted the disturbance and began moving to intercept Hawkins, but the Master Chief was already too close to the platform. The Admiral paused his reading as security personnel noticed the disruption. Secret Service agents moved closer to the platform while military police began converging on Hawkins' position. The carefully orchestrated ceremony was rapidly becoming a security incident, with 282 elite warriors serving as unwilling witnesses to an unfolding crisis. Sarah turned to see what was causing the commotion just as Hawkins reached the edge of the platform. His face was flushed with rage, his hands clenched into fists. Years of combat stress, personal loss, and accumulated resentment had reached a breaking point. In his alcohol-clouded mind, Sarah represented everything wrong with the military's changing culture. "This is garbage," Hawkins shouted, his voice carrying across the silent formation. "Real warriors die in combat while civilians get medals for sitting behind computers." His words cut through the morning air like shrapnel, creating a tension that made everyone present understand they were witnessing something that would be remembered long after the ceremony ended. Security moved to restrain Hawkins, but he was a Navy SEAL with decades of combat training. He broke through the initial response, driven by grief and rage that had been building since his son's death. The rational part of his mind that had made him an effective warrior was overwhelmed by emotion and alcohol, creating a dangerous combination that threatened to explode. Admiral Mitchell stepped forward, his command presence evident even in this chaotic moment. As a former SEAL himself, he understood the pressures that could break even the strongest warriors. "Master Chief, stand down immediately," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of decades in uniform and countless combat situations. But Hawkins was beyond reasoning. The death of his son, the collapse of his marriage, and years of accumulating trauma had created a perfect storm of destructive emotion. He saw Sarah as a symbol of what he perceived as the military's declining standards, a civilian receiving recognition while real warriors like his son died forgotten in distant wars. Sarah stood frozen on the platform, her mind struggling to process the rapidly evolving situation. One moment she was receiving the highest honor of her career, surrounded by respect and ceremony. The next, she faced a highly trained warrior whose anguish had transformed into dangerous rage directed at her personally. The 282 SEALs in formation watched with professional interest tinged by growing concern. They recognized Hawkins' emotional state and understood the potential for violence. Many had served with him, respected his combat record, and felt sympathy for his personal losses. Others disapproved of his actions but hesitated to intervene against a decorated veteran. Morrison finally reached the platform's edge but couldn't get past the security perimeter that was trying to maintain some semblance of control. He watched helplessly as his team member faced a crisis that no intelligence training had prepared her for. This wasn't about analyzing enemy communications or predicting terrorist movements. This was about human breakdown in its rawest form. Hawkins climbed onto the platform despite security attempts to stop him. His SEAL training made him formidable even in his compromised state, and security personnel were reluctant to use force against a decorated veteran in front of hundreds of witnesses. The situation required careful handling to prevent escalation that could result in serious injury or worse. You want to play soldier? Hawkins snarled at Sarah, his voice thick with emotion and alcohol. You want honors meant for warriors? Then, prove you deserve them. His challenge carried implications that made everyone present understand they were witnessing something unprecedented and, potentially catastrophic. Sarah's father rose from his seat in the VIP section, his own military training recognizing the danger his daughter faced. But, military police prevented civilian movement, maintaining security protocols even as the situation spiraled beyond normal parameters. He watched helplessly as his daughter faced a threat unlike anything she'd encountered in her intelligence work. Colonel Williams moved closer to the platform, her own experience with military discrimination giving her insight into the complex dynamics at play. She understood that this moment would define not just Sarah's career, but the military's commitment to recognizing excellence regardless of traditional boundaries. The outcome would send a message throughout the special operations community. The base chaplain, still near the podium from his opening prayer, recognized the spiritual crisis underlying the physical confrontation. Hawkins wasn't just angry at Sarah, he was raging against losses he couldn't accept, grief he couldn't process, and a changing world he couldn't understand. This was a man's soul crying out in anguish, manifesting as dangerous aggression. Photography equipment that had been positioned to capture Sarah's triumph now documented a crisis that would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. The contrast between the ceremony's intended celebration and its violent deviation created a dramatic tension that underscored the complexity of military service in modern times. As security struggled to control the situation without escalating violence, Hawkins made a decision that shocked everyone present. Rather than attacking Sarah physically, he chose a form of psychological warfare designed to humiliate and break her spirit. It was a tactic born from combat experience, understanding that sometimes destroying an enemy's will was more effective than physical violence. Kneel before me, Hawkins commanded, his voice carrying the authority of 2 decades in special operations. Show these warriors what you really are. His demand created a moment of terrible silence, where hundreds of elite soldiers waited to see how a young civilian would respond to a challenge that cut to the heart of military culture. The demand struck at fundamental concepts of honor, respect, and hierarchy that formed the backbone of military service. Hawkins was using his rank and reputation to force Sarah into a position of submission that would undermine everything the ceremony was meant to represent. It was psychological warfare designed to humiliate not just Sarah, but the entire concept of recognizing non-combat contributions. Sarah felt the weight of hundreds of eyes watching her response. Every SEAL in formation, every officer on the platform, every family member in the bleachers waited to see how she would handle this unprecedented challenge. Her response would define not just this moment, but her entire future in military intelligence and beyond. The wind from the Pacific Ocean carried the salt smell of the sea across the parade ground, a reminder of the vast world beyond this moment of crisis. But, for Sarah Chen, standing alone on a platform facing a breakdown warrior's challenge, the entire universe had collapsed into this single decision that would determine everything that followed. Time seemed suspended as she considered her options, understanding that whatever choice she made would echo through her life and the lives of everyone witnessing this unprecedented confrontation between honor and humiliation, between celebration and crisis, between the military's past and its evolving future. The silence stretched across Naval Base Coronado like a held breath. 282 Navy SEALs, America's most elite warriors, stood witness to a moment that would be seared into their memories forever. Sarah Chen faced Master Chief Derek Hawkins on the ceremony platform, his command to kneel echoing in the salt-tinged morning air. Sarah's mind raced through her options with the same analytical precision she applied to intelligence problems. She could refuse and risk escalation that might result in violence. She could comply and face humiliation that would undermine everything the ceremony represented. Or she could find a third option that no one expected. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from childhood lessons about honor and dignity. In life, Sarah, there are moments when your character is tested. These moments define who you truly are, not when things are easy, but when they are impossible. She had never imagined those words would apply to a situation like this. Admiral Mitchell stepped forward, his command presence attempting to reassert control over the deteriorating situation. Master Chief Hawkins, you are relieved of duty effective immediately. Security will escort you from this ceremony. But Hawkins had moved beyond the reach of military discipline, driven by grief and rage that had been building since his son's death in Afghanistan. "Stay back, Admiral," Hawkins warned, his voice carrying the dangerous edge of a man with nothing left to lose. "This is between me and the pretend soldier who thinks she deserves honors meant for real warriors." His words carried the weight of 25 years in special operations, during which he had earned the respect of every man in formation. The assembled SEALs found themselves in an impossible position. They respected Hawkins' service record and understood his pain, but they also recognized that his actions threatened the integrity of their brotherhood. Many had worked with Sarah and acknowledged her contributions, while others remained skeptical about civilians receiving military recognition. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, standing in the front rank, felt the tension pulling him in different directions. He had initially questioned Sarah's recognition but had come to respect her work after seeing how her intelligence saved lives during his last deployment. Now he watched a decorated veteran's breakdown, threatening to destroy everything the ceremony was meant to represent. Sarah's mother sat in the VIP section, her hands pressed together in prayer as she watched her daughter face an unthinkable situation. She had immigrated to America with dreams of opportunity and safety for her family. The sight of her daughter being threatened by the very military she served created a terrible irony that cut to her heart. Lieutenant Commander Morrison pushed against the security perimeter, desperate to reach his team member. He had recommended Sarah for this recognition based on merit and achievement, and he felt responsible for putting her in this vulnerable position. His own military honor demanded that he protect those under his command, but circumstances had placed him on the sidelines of this confrontation. The base photographer continued documenting the unfolding drama, understanding that these images would become historical records of a moment that challenged traditional military culture. The contrast between the ceremony's intended celebration and its violent deviation created a powerful visual narrative that would be studied and analyzed for years to come. Sarah looked directly into Hawkins' eyes and saw something that her intelligence training had taught her to recognize: a man drowning in grief and seeking someone to blame for losses that made no sense. His son had died serving his country, his marriage had collapsed under the strain of repeated deployments, and his identity as a warrior was being challenged by a changing military culture. "Master Chief," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed silence, "I cannot kneel before you because we serve the same flag and the same mission. But I can stand with you in honoring your son's sacrifice and recognizing your pain." Her words acknowledged his loss while refusing his demand for submission. The response caught everyone off guard. Rather than accepting humiliation or escalating confrontation, Sarah had chosen compassion. She recognized that Hawkins' rage was really grief in disguise, and she chose to address the underlying wound rather than the surface aggression. But Hawkins was too far gone to accept olive branches. "Don't you dare mention my son," he roared, his grief transforming into pure fury. "He died a warrior while you play games on computers." His pain erupted in a way that made everyone present understand they were witnessing a man's complete emotional breakdown. Without warning, Hawkins lunged forward and shoved Sarah hard in the chest. The force sent her stumbling backward, her dress uniform torn as she fought to maintain balance. The assembled SEALs tensed, ready to intervene, while security personnel moved to subdue Hawkins before the situation escalated further. Sarah hit the platform hard, her knee striking the wooden surface with enough force to draw blood. For a moment, she remained down, stunned by the sudden violence and the pain shooting through her leg. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of the Pacific wind across the parade ground. This was the moment that would define everything that followed. Sarah Chen, lying on a ceremony platform with torn uniform and bleeding knee, faced a choice that would determine not just her own future, but the future of military culture itself. Would she allow this moment to break her, or would she find the strength to rise in a way that honored everything the ceremony was meant to represent? The 282 SEALs watched with growing respect as Sarah slowly pushed herself to her feet. Blood trickled down her leg, staining her dress uniform, but her posture remained straight and dignified. She wiped dust from her hands and looked directly at Hawkins with an expression that combined understanding and determination. Colonel Williams felt tears in her eyes as she watched Sarah rise. She had faced her own challenges as a woman in the military, but nothing comparable to this public humiliation in front of the special operations community. Sarah's response would either validate or undermine decades of progress toward recognizing merit regardless of traditional boundaries. Admiral Mitchell prepared to end the ceremony and have Hawkins arrested, but Sarah raised her hand slightly, indicating she wanted to address the situation herself. This was her moment, her test, and she needed to meet it on her own terms. The admiral hesitated, recognizing that leadership sometimes meant allowing others to prove themselves under fire. Hawkins stood over Sarah, breathing heavily, his rage still burning but beginning to mix with shame as he realized what he had done. 25 years of honorable service had been stained by this moment of weakness, and he knew his career was over. But the grief that had driven him to this point remained as raw as ever. Sarah straightened her torn uniform as best she could and addressed not just Hawkins, but the entire formation. Master Chief Hawkins has served this country with honor for 25 years, she began, her voice steady despite her injury. He has earned the right to be heard, even in his pain. I will not dishonor his service by allowing this moment to define either of us. The words carried across the formation like a challenge to everyone present. Sarah was choosing to take the high ground, to respond to violence with dignity, and to honor Hawkins' service even as she refused to accept humiliation. It was a response that demonstrated the kind of courage that had nothing to do with physical strength and everything to do with character. But the test was far from over. Hawkins' breakdown had created a situation that demanded resolution, and the eyes of 282 elite warriors remained fixed on this young civilian who was redefining their understanding of what it meant to be strong. The ceremony had become something entirely different from what anyone had planned, but perhaps more important than anyone had imagined. The sun climbed higher over Naval Base Coronado, casting new shadows across a scene that would be remembered long after the participants had moved on to other assignments and other challenges. This was no longer just about recognizing intelligence contributions or honoring military service. This had become a test of character, courage, and the ability to find strength in the most impossible circumstances. Sarah Chin stood on that platform, blood on her uniform and dignity intact, facing a choice that would echo through her life and the lives of everyone watching. The next few minutes would determine whether this moment became a triumph of the human spirit or a tragedy that undermined everything the military claimed to represent. The blood from Sarah's knee had soaked through her dress uniform, creating a stark reminder of the violence that had shattered the ceremony's dignity. But, as she stood facing the formation of 282 Navy SEALs, something extraordinary began to happen. Her refusal to be broken by humiliation was transforming the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Master Chief Derek Hawkins stared at Sarah with confusion replacing some of his rage. In 25 years of military service, he had never encountered someone who responded to aggression with such calm dignity. His combat experience had taught him that people either fought back or surrendered when attacked. Sarah was doing neither, and it was forcing him to confront the reality of what he had done. Admiral Mitchell watched from his position near the podium, recognizing that this moment had evolved beyond military protocol into something that would define careers and possibly change institutional culture. Sarah's response was demonstrating a form of courage that the military rarely acknowledged but desperately needed. Her composure under attack was as impressive as any battlefield heroism. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had finally broken through the security perimeter and reached the platform's edge. He wanted to intervene, to protect his team member from further assault, but he also recognized that Sarah was handling the situation with a sophistication that might be undermined by external interference. This was her moment to prove herself in front of the special operations community. The assembled SEALs remained at attention, but their focus had shifted entirely to the drama playing out before them. Many had served in combat zones where they had witnessed various forms of courage under fire. What they were seeing now was different but equally impressive: the courage to maintain dignity when facing humiliation, to show compassion when receiving aggression. Sarah wiped blood from her torn uniform and addressed Hawkins directly, her voice carrying clearly across the silent formation. "Master Chief, your son died serving something greater than himself. That sacrifice deserves honor, not the destruction of everything he fought to protect." Her words acknowledged his loss while challenging him to rise above his pain. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson felt something shift in his understanding as he listened to Sarah's response. He had initially questioned whether a civilian deserved recognition alongside combat veterans, but her behavior under pressure was demonstrating the kind of moral courage that formed the foundation of military values. She was proving her worth in the most demanding way possible. Colonel Patricia Williams stepped closer to the platform, ready to intervene if necessary but hoping Sarah could continue handling the situation herself. As the highest-ranking female officer present, Williams understood the broader implications of this confrontation. Sarah's response would influence how the military viewed civilian contributions and female leadership for years to come. The base chaplain, still positioned near the podium, recognized the spiritual dimensions of what was unfolding. This was more than a confrontation between individuals, it was a battle between different concepts of honor, service, and what it meant to be strong. Sarah was demonstrating that true strength sometimes meant absorbing pain rather than inflicting it. Hawkins' breathing became more labored as the full weight of his actions began penetrating his alcohol-clouded judgment. The sight of blood on Sarah's uniform, the shocked silence of his fellow SEALs, and her unexpected compassion were combining to break through his rage and expose the raw grief underneath. He had dishonored everything he claimed to protect. Sarah's parents watched from the VIP section with a mixture of pride and terror. They had taught their daughter to respond to hatred with dignity, but they had never imagined she would face such a test in front of America's most elite warriors. Her father's military experience helped him understand that this moment would define her entire future relationship with the armed forces. The base photographer continued documenting the confrontation, understanding that these images would become part of military history. The visual contrast between Sarah's bloodied uniform and her composed demeanor created a powerful narrative about different forms of heroism. These photographs would be studied in leadership courses for decades. Security personnel maintained their positions around the platform, ready to intervene if violence escalated, but increasingly impressed by Sarah's handling of the situation. They had expected either capitulation or confrontation, not this demonstration of grace under pressure that was gradually diffusing the crisis through moral authority rather than force. Sarah took a step toward Hawkins, ignoring the pain in her injured knee. "Master Chief, I'm not your enemy. I'm someone who chose to serve in the way my skills allowed, just as you chose to serve in the way your skills allowed. We're on the same side." Her approach required tremendous courage, moving closer to someone who had just attacked her. The words seemed to reach something deep within Hawkins' psyche. For the first time since his breakdown began, he looked directly into Sarah's eyes without rage clouding his vision. What he saw there wasn't fear or hatred, but genuine concern for his well-being despite what he had done to her. It was a kindness he hadn't experienced since his son's death. The formation of SEALs witnessed something remarkable as their Master Chief's shoulders began to shake with suppressed emotion. The rage that had driven him to violence was collapsing under the weight of Sarah's compassion and the reality of his own actions. 25 years of honorable service had been stained by this moment of weakness, and the consequences were becoming clear. Admiral Mitchell prepared to step forward as Hawkins' emotional state became more unstable, but Sarah gestured slightly for him to wait. She sensed that Hawkins was on the verge of a breakthrough, that his rage was finally giving way to the grief he had been avoiding since his son's death. This was a moment that required careful handling. "Your son would be proud of your service, Master Chief," Sarah continued, her voice gentle but clear enough for the entire formation to hear. "Don't let his memory be dishonored by actions that contradict everything he died defending." Her words carried the weight of truth that even Hawkins' pain couldn't deny. The mention of his son's pride triggered something profound in Hawkins' psyche. He imagined his boy's reaction to seeing his father attack an unarmed woman during a ceremony meant to honor service. The shame hit him like a physical blow, and, for the first time since Sarah had been introduced, his anger was directed inward where it belonged. Morrison watched this psychological drama unfold with professional fascination and personal concern. He had seen Sarah analyze enemy behavior and predict terrorist actions, but her ability to read Hawkins' emotional state and respond appropriately demonstrated insights that went beyond intelligence training. She was improvising solutions in real time under enormous pressure. The wind from the Pacific Ocean carried the sounds of routine base operations, aircraft engines, training exercises, and the normal bustle of military life continuing despite the crisis on the parade ground. But, for everyone present, the normal world had ceased to exist. This moment was defining careers, relationships, and understanding of what military service truly meant. As Hawkins struggled with his emotions, several SEALs in the formation began to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't just about a breakdown or a ceremony gone wrong. This was about different concepts of strength, courage, and honor being tested in the most public way possible. Sarah was redefining their understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. The ceremony that had begun as recognition for intelligence achievements had become something much more significant, a demonstration of moral courage that would be remembered long after the original purpose was forgotten. Sarah Chen, standing bloodied but unbroken on a military platform, was teaching 282 elite warriors a lesson about true strength that no training exercise could provide. But the confrontation was not yet over. Hawkins remained emotionally unstable, capable of further violence or complete breakdown. Sarah's compassionate approach had diffused much of the immediate danger, but the situation still required resolution that would satisfy military justice while acknowledging the human tragedy that had created this crisis. The next few minutes would determine whether this moment became a triumph of the human spirit or a cautionary tale about the costs of unprocessed grief. The transformation of Master Chief Derek Hawkins happened slowly, then, all at once. As Sarah's words about his son's pride penetrated the fog of grief and rage that had consumed him, 25 years of military discipline reasserted itself. The warrior who had served with honor in the world's most dangerous places looked at the blood on Sarah's uniform and, finally, understood the magnitude of what he had done. Hawkins dropped to his knees on the platform, not in submission, but in the crushing weight of shame and grief that he had been avoiding since his son's death 6 months earlier. The sight of this decorated veteran breaking down completely sent shockwaves through the formation of 282 SEALs who had served with him, respected him, and now watched him confront his deepest pain in the most public way possible. Sarah Chen, standing above the kneeling Master Chief with blood staining her torn uniform, faced a choice that would define not just this moment but the entire trajectory of her military career. She could accept his breakdown as justice for the humiliation he had inflicted, or she could demonstrate the kind of leadership that transcends rank and transforms crisis into opportunity for healing. Without hesitation, Sarah knelt beside Hawkins, ignoring the pain in her injured knee and the shocked gasps from the VIP section where her parents watched in disbelief. She placed her hand on the Master Chief's shoulder and spoke quietly enough that only he could hear her initial words: "Your son's service was not in vain, and neither is yours. But you have to choose to honor that service instead of destroying it." Admiral Mitchell stepped forward, recognizing that the situation had moved beyond protocol into something that required command decision. The ceremony was clearly over, but how it ended would send a message throughout the special operations community about values, leadership, and the military's commitment to its people during their darkest moments. The assembled SEALs remained at attention, but their emotional state was anything but disciplined. Many had served with Hawkins, knew his reputation for excellence under fire, and understood that combat stress could break even the strongest warriors. Others focused on Sarah's response, recognizing a form of courage that challenged their traditional understanding of what it meant to be strong. Lieutenant Commander Morrison finally reached the platform and knelt beside both Sarah and Hawkins, creating a tableau that the base photographer captured in what would become one of the most powerful military images of the decade. 3 people on their knees, one in breakdown, one in compassion, and one in support, representing the best and worst of military culture in a single frame. Colonel Patricia Williams approached the microphone, understanding that this moment required leadership that acknowledged both the crisis and the grace being demonstrated in response to it. Her voice carried clearly across the formation as she addressed not just the assembled SEALs, but everyone present at what had become an unprecedented display of human complexity. "What we have witnessed today," Colonel Williams began, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment, "is not just the breakdown of one warrior or the courage of another. We have seen the reality that military service demands everything from those who choose it, and sometimes that demand becomes more than human beings can bear without help." Master Chief Hawkins looked up at Sarah through tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed since his son's funeral. The young civilian he had tried to humiliate was showing him a kindness he didn't deserve, demonstrating the very values he had claimed to defend. Her hand on his shoulder represented forgiveness he couldn't give himself. Sarah's father stood in the VIP section, his own military experience helping him understand the profound significance of what his daughter was doing. She was not just showing personal courage, she was demonstrating the kind of leadership that could heal wounds and build bridges across divisions that seemed impossible to cross. The base chaplain approached the group on the platform, recognizing that this moment required spiritual as well as military resolution. The breakdown, the violence, the compassion, and the forgiveness had created a situation that demanded acknowledgement of human frailty and the possibility of redemption. Admiral Mitchell made a decision that would be debated in military circles for years to come. Instead of having Hawkins arrested immediately, he chose to treat this as a medical emergency requiring intervention rather than simply a disciplinary problem requiring punishment. Master Chief Hawkins will be immediately transported for psychological evaluation and treatment, he announced. His service record over 25 years speaks to his character under normal circumstances. Sarah helped Hawkins to his feet, supporting him as medical personnel arrived to provide assistance. The Master Chief who had demanded that she kneel was now leaning on her for support, creating an irony that was not lost on anyone present. Her strength was supporting his weakness, her grace was covering his shame. The formation of SEALs watched this reversal with growing understanding that they were witnessing something that would change how they thought about strength, service, and what it meant to have each other's backs. Sarah was demonstrating that having someone's back didn't just mean covering them in combat, but supporting them when they were breaking down. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, standing in the front rank, felt his initial skepticism about civilian recognition evaporating completely. Sarah's response to this crisis had demonstrated every quality the military claimed to value: courage under fire, compassion for wounded comrades, and the ability to maintain mission focus despite personal attack. As medical personnel took charge of Hawkins, he looked back at Sarah one final time. "I'm sorry," he said, the words carrying the weight of 25 years of service that had been stained by one moment of uncontrolled grief. "You have more honor than I showed today." His apology acknowledged not just the attack, but his misjudgment about what it meant to serve with distinction. Sarah nodded acknowledgement of his apology, but her focus had already shifted to the broader implications of this moment. The ceremony was ruined, her uniform was bloodied, and her knee throbbed with pain, but something more important had been achieved. She had proven herself to 282 of America's most elite warriors in the most demanding way possible. Admiral Mitchell resumed his position at the podium, understanding that this ceremony required completion despite its dramatic interruption. "Today we gathered to honor intelligence achievements that saved lives across multiple continents. We are leaving with a demonstration of moral courage that will save careers, relationships, and possibly lives in the future." The medal presentation proceeded with Sarah standing at attention despite her injured knee and torn uniform. The contrast between her current state and the pristine ceremony that had been planned created a powerful visual metaphor for military service itself, the reality that honor often comes through adversity rather than in spite of it. As Admiral Mitchell placed the medal around Sarah's neck, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 18 months ago, she had been a recent graduate with theoretical knowledge and ambitious dreams. Today, she was a tested veteran who had proven her worth in ways she never could have imagined. The formation of SEALs rendered honors as the ceremony concluded, but their attention remained focused on Sarah rather than military protocol. She had earned something more valuable than official recognition. She had gained the respect of warriors who measured worth through performance under pressure rather than credentials or connections. Morrison approached Sarah as medical personnel finished treating her knee injury. "That was the most impressive leadership performance I've witnessed in 20 years of military service," he said quietly. "You just redefined what it means to be strong for everyone who was watching." Colonel Williams joined them, her own emotions barely controlled as she processed what she had witnessed. "Sarah, what you did today will be studied in leadership courses for decades. You demonstrated that true strength sometimes means absorbing pain rather than inflicting it, and that real courage can involve compassion for those who attack us." As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah's parents approached the platform. Her mother embraced her carefully, mindful of her injuries, while her father stood at attention and saluted his daughter. "You honored our family and your country today," he said simply, the words carrying more weight than any official citation. The base photographer showed Sarah the images he had captured, particularly the photograph of her kneeling beside Hawkins with Morrison joining them. The image would appear on magazine covers, in training manuals, and, ultimately, in the Pentagon's hallway of leadership examples. It captured something essential about military service that statistics and reports could never convey. 3 months later, Sarah received a letter from Master Chief Hawkins, written from a treatment facility where he was addressing the psychological wounds that had driven his breakdown. "You saved my life that day," he wrote. "Not just my career or my reputation, but my life. By showing me compassion when I deserved punishment, you reminded me that healing was possible and that my son's memory could still be honored through better choices." The ceremony that had been planned as recognition for intelligence achievements became something much more significant, a demonstration that the military's greatest strength lay not in weapons or tactics, but in the character of individuals who chose service over self-interest, compassion over retribution, and healing over hatred. Sarah Chan, the young civilian analyst who had proven herself to 282 Navy SEALs in the most demanding way possible, continued her intelligence career with a reputation that opened doors throughout the special operations community. But, more importantly, she had demonstrated that true warriors are defined not by their ability to inflict pain, but by their capacity to heal wounds and build bridges across the deepest divisions. The story of what happened at Naval Base Coronado that day became legend throughout the military, passed down through generations of service members as an example of grace under pressure and the power of choosing compassion over revenge. It reminded everyone who heard it that the greatest victories are sometimes won not through violence, but through the courage to show mercy to those who least deserve it.